Separate the real from the fake. See, we got to get back to love. If we get back to love, then that's when we're going to get back to us.
Seems like it's never enough. And what do you say when you're...
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special edition of People Empowerment, where we would strive to change the conditions in our community. As you know, over the past few weeks, we've had different politicians on and different people that are running to be new politicians. Our latest encounters have been with Mike Madigan, who's running for Congress, and Brian Higgins, who is the current congressman. Today we have Mike Madigan back, and also there's a guest with him, Mr. Wilson. It's hard for me to pronounce his first name, so I'm just going to say Mr. Wilson. Today we are going to talk about some serious topics, and I hope that the people learn some information here and are willing to ask some questions and look into the information that we're about to disseminate today, so that you can make your own opinions about what we're talking about. So, Mr. Madigan, it's nice to have you back on.
Doing?
Mr. Wilson, how you doing? Excuse me, reaching over. How are you today?
I'm good. It's Wallace, just so you know.
Okay, Mr. Wallace?
Wallace.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wallace. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, glad to have you gentlemen on today. As you know, Mike, I had you on 3 times, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Then Mr. Higgins came on, and he sat here, and we had a really, what I thought was a really good conversation. His opinions and his outlooks on things are definitely different than yours.
Very different.
After you went on the website and you looked at some of the things that he said, and you called me up and you texted me up and left some information that it wasn't quite the way he said it. And so I had you come back on so you could explain to the people yourself what you feel is contradictory.
So Nate, not to interrupt. So, I mean, when I watched him talk about the Davis-Bacon Act, the Davis-Bacon Act has a very big impact on the community here in Buffalo. Buffalo's community is about 56% African American. The impact from the Davis-Bacon Act, which was enacted in 1931 for the specific purpose of blocking low education or uneducated, unskilled workers from getting good, high-paying jobs. It's the Davis-Bacon Act. It's high-paying jobs that are federally funded. Think roads, bridges, all your major construction sites, the school construction. And if you go to any of the sites here in Buffalo, you will see that the complexion at the work sites do not represent the 56% population of the African American, and similarly for the Hispanic community and other minority communities. There's a reason for that. And when I watch what Mr. Higgins said, he knowingly, and I don't say this lightly, I don't attack. I've committed, and I think people have seen I am not one to personally attack, and this is not a personal attack. This is an issue that I've had as a major, one of my major 2, education and Davis-Bacon are the 2 items I've been running on. Mr. Higgins has done his research. He knows the history. He knows what this act does. He knows that the decision, so this is how the act works.
Well, before you go on, I just want to explain to the public that I want you to understand, whatever my political affiliation, I am very unbiased, and I like to bring out both sides of a situation. So that's why I have Mr. Madigan here. So I have to let him explain himself. He was telling me about the Davis-Bacon Act. I talked to Congressman Higgins, and I got something else from him. And like I say, now Mr. Madigan is clarifying some things that I really didn't know because I didn't do my research. And you know, if what he's saying is true about Davis-Bacon, which I am going to research it after this conversation, then that's something that needs to be appealed, and I'm not really comfortable with it. So that's another reason why he's on now. Would you please go on?
So the Davis-Bacon Act, it applies to all federally funded construction jobs throughout the city here and throughout the United States. So it's not just this city, it's all cities. And what it does is it requires a prevailing wage. Think in terms of all full benefits, full pay for a highly skilled worker. What Mr. Higgins said was that even though that act is in effect and it requires every single worker to be high paid, high benefits, full paid.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. But 100% of the workforce has to be making that wage. What it does, the contracts are competitively bid. A contractor will not hire for apprenticeship or for training an unskilled worker. It effectively blocks anyone that if you want to do an apprenticeship, which he specifically cited relative to the Davis-Bacon Act, when he knows, he's done his research, he knows that that act will not allow, if any contractor that wants to win a bid, they will not invest 6 to 9 to 12 months on a person that's making, let's say, $60,000 an hour, or a year rather, and full benefits. I mean, it's just cost prohibitive. It would put them at a competitive disadvantage. They would lose every one of the bids. They are not able to hire. It's just a basic business decision that blocks effectively all those that we failed to educate here in the Buffalo Public Schools.
Okay, now I want to break that down a little bit more so the public can understand it, because, and I want to understand it more. Sure. Also. So you're saying that any jobs that are done under the Davis-Bacon Act, that they can have apprentices on the job site?
I'm saying it's a basic business decision. If they want to be a successful bidder on a project, they can't afford to invest a serious investment. Think the cost of about 3 cars on an unskilled laborer that's never done the job before. He's contending that they would do that investment, but any basic business person that just took a pen and a piece of paper and a pencil and wrote it down for 2 seconds would quickly realize they would not be able to afford to hire an apprentice person, an unskilled laborer, and train them for the 6 to 9 to 12 months. So you're saying they lose money?
They would not hiring this person?
No, actually, because it's a competitive bid, they're bidding against other companies for that contract. If they are hiring people and investing, they have to hire at full wages, which think in terms of $60,000 plus benefits. For a person that's never done the job, so it's going to take 6 to probably closer to a full year before that person's qualified to really do that job as a fully skilled laborer. But right from day one, they have to pay full skilled laborer work wages. So he won't be a productive addition to the workforce for 6 to 9 to 12 months. Anyone that's competitively bidding is only going to be hiring the people that are fully efficient, productive on the job, fully trained, so that they can win the bid, because they can't afford not to win the bid. They want to win the bids that they're competing for that particular work contract.
Okay, now if it's a prevailing wage job and a contractor submitted man hours in his bid and so on, then I'm not sure I understand what the problem would be with the contractor when the prevailing wage, the money is coming from the state or government or whatever. So still, I'm not
The contractor is making a bid. Let's say the total job is going to require $1 million. They're saying, I can do this job for $1 million. They then must stay within that budget of $1 million. Okay. So it's really not the federal that's paying for it. They'll give you that contractor $1 million to build that school.
Okay, they must stay in that budget.
So they must stay in that budget. So now, that budget, so they're competing against another company. And if they're hiring someone that's really not productive because they've never done the job, and this company over here hires 10 guys, all 10 highly skilled, ready to go, working from day one, and this guy, 1 out of the 10 guys, they're going to invest to, they're going to have to hire 11 guys to do the same amount of work as this company if they're going to invest in an apprenticeship for that 11th person, because they can't do the job until they're fully skilled and able to run the bulldozer or the crane or pour the cement,
So you're saying that the general contractor wouldn't want to hire these unskilled people because he's going to lose money?
I'm saying that is correct. No, it would cost more to hire an apprentice and invest in training a person on the job. It's cost prohibitive. It's not feasible to do. And in fact, they don't do it. And that's why when you go to any of these federally funded, Davis-Bacon Act funded school construction sites, bridges, roads, you will not see an apprenticeship occurring there. You will not see an unskilled laborer being trained to become a skilled laborer. Now, non-Davis-Bacon Act private contractors, you will see that they do that, but not on these federally funded jobs, because it would put that contractor at a competitive disadvantage.
Okay, so now all of these federally funded jobs, are they all under the Davis-Bacon Act? And state jobs, government jobs?
So there is a lot of construction that happens right here in Buffalo that if it's directly 100% funded or partially funded, it will be typically under the Davis-Bacon, and you will not see any apprenticeships occurring there. You will not see an unskilled laborer being trained to become a skilled laborer like Mr. Higgins claimed was possible. No, well, he knows that it's not possible, that it's not feasible. As a business, you would not be able to compete against the other contractors, because unless it's mandated, the act right now is doing exactly what it did in 1931.
Yeah, talk about that.
It was enacted in 1931 as a matter of history and a matter of record, and if you go out to Wikipedia, it's there, it's been there forever, well, for a long time, that in 1931 in Long Island, the act was enacted to block Southern blacks who had moved up. They were uneducated, but they were taking jobs away from the predominantly white population. Contractor, once again, bridges, roads, etc. And when that act was put into effect, it unemployed those people and the predominantly white workforce, and right up to this day has maintained that block, and it's doing exactly what it did then today, which is effectively blocking or preventing unskilled workers from being trained on the job. Think helper worker, think apprenticeship, because it's cost prohibitive. It's not feasible to hire an unskilled laborer and still compete with the other 3 to 4 contractors that are going after that same job. They all will sit there and say, how can I, as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, complete that project and beat these other guys that are trying to come in at a lower cost? And to invest in a unskilled laborer would not be possible.
So again, you're saying,
because you would lose.
So again, you're saying that the general contractors would lose money if they took on these unskilled workers.
Actually, they would not win the contract. So they bid. Think of like at an auction.
Well, why wouldn't they win the contract? How would the people, the government that's given the contract, know that they've hired these unskilled workers? Why wouldn't they win the contract?
The contract, when the contractor, the person that's doing the job, is costing out and saying, it's going to cost me $1 million to do this job, they have it right down to how many people, how many workers are going to be required to make this, to build this bridge.
Okay.
So in the case where you have all fully highly skilled workers, let's say it takes
it's going to be completed in a shorter time.
10 people to build that bridge. If you're going to hire an unskilled laborer, it's going to take 11 or 12 because 2 of the workers have never done the work before.
Okay.
But now it's required that they're getting paid the same amount as the other 10 guys, even though they've never done the job and they have to be trained. And let's face it, if you take 2 unskilled workers, it's probably going to take 7 or 10 before you get 2 that actually become skilled laborers. I mean, it's a real investment to do that training. And if you're paying full wages, the same amount as the guys that are truly skilled laborers, number one, you're going to make those guys very mad. Number two, you can't afford, because suddenly you're at a competitive disadvantage relative to the other contractor that you're trying to win the bid from.
Okay, now with all this being said, okay?
So 20% more costly to do that with 2 apprentices than this.
Okay, so what would be Congressman Madigan's answer to the Davis-Bacon Act?
So I think, prevailing wage, I'm not against that. What I am against, even though I contend that if it were totally repealed and not replaced, that you would get 30, because it results in the cost of a project being about 30% higher, which would mean that you could do 30% more construction and you would have a mini boom as a result, because your federal dollars will go farther and you can do more federal projects, more employment, and in particular more employment of your minority population here in the city. However, if I had to compromise, which frequently you do in Congress, I would say 20% of the federal funds should be set aside to permit, for specifically called out, mandated for apprenticeships and on-the-job vocational training as a remedy to our current situation, which we failed with a 20% graduation rate here in Buffalo, not just here, in many of our inner cities, we failed to educate. We need a remedy, and we need to start getting people employed, and we need to be competitive against welfare, and we're not. And these types of acts, this federal act, which is racist, needs to be repealed and replaced, or repealed completely, and the resulting boom in both minority employment and prosperity for the area would be significant.
All right, well, let me ask you this, Mike. Now, you are a Republican.
Yes.
And we know the Republican Party is predominantly white.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And mostly wealthy. So what is your motivation to repeal the Davis-Bacon Act and to start helping minorities get employment? What is your motivation?
You know, my motivation is, I'm a Republican. Think Frederick Douglass, think Lincoln. What was their motivation? Doing the right thing. Right now, we have a scar on the ethical and moral fabric of the United States. We have failed in our top 10 most violent cities. They have a common denominator. We have failed to educate our inner city minorities.
Okay.
We have failed. And what does that result in? I mean, our public schools are a pipeline to prison. Once you get a felony, you can't be employed. And you know, if you haven't been educated, you are blocked from all these federal jobs. That is why you do not see the makeup on these federally funded construction jobs. They do not represent the population where the work is being done.
Why are you motivated to change that?
Same motivation that Lincoln had. I mean, it's what's right. It's doing the right thing. You know, my history at work, in almost everything I do, I always have to have some kind of a purpose-driven life.
Okay.
And you know, I see something wrong, and I like to fix things. That's what drives me. It motivates me. It gives me a sense of purpose. Think, what is it? Habitat for Humanity. Look at how many people volunteer for those types of activities. You know, I see a problem. Habitat for Humanity is a good correlation. People get a lot of sense of purpose. They really love doing that type of work. This is the type of thing that I like to do. And I'm a fixer. That's what I do. I'm a process-focused person and a fact-based, database-focused person. And I look at the facts, and I can see clearly that there's something wrong here that needs to be fixed. And that's what's motivating me.
So do you think that Mr. Higgins perhaps just misspoke when he talked about this?
He knows what this act does. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not going to use certain words, but I think people can draw their own conclusions. He knows what the makeup is on these construction sites. He knows that an apprenticeship is not feasible. And, you know, draw your own conclusions, because I'm not going to just come right out and say it, because I don't believe in that. However, I think the facts speak on themselves. He knows what this act does. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of Democrats know what this act does. And the fact
why are they perpetuating it? Why do they go along with it?
Who pays for these politicians to be in office? They are bought and paid for. My opponent is bought and paid for. There's unions unions are paying for him to be in office, and he's doing their bidding. And part of that is there's a block that's occurring in our minority community.
Well, couldn't people turn around and say that you're bought and paid for too, and perhaps if you say what you're saying and you're able to accomplish your goal of winning the congressional seat by using this, aren't there people who would think that once you were into office that you would just walk away too and say, well, I'm in now, and why should I help these?
See, I'm motivated not by money, and that's where, you know, where my opponent and I differ, because one of the things he made a statement in the Buffalo News and said, you know, Madigan's only using education for the purpose of trying to convince people, the inner city African Americans, to vote for him. And you know what? I think that speaks volumes on Mr. Higgins, because for him to say that, you know, I should be insulted, but I'm not, because I know where he's coming from. He comes from a position and a world belief or worldview where, if I'm going to do this, what's in it for me? What are you going to give me? As opposed to, I'm doing this because I get a sense of purpose for doing it. Not because I get anything back. You know what? I do get something back. I get just like the Habitat for Humanity. People get a sense of purpose, and it gives them a sense of purpose. And that's why I'm doing it, and that's what my motivation is.
All right, Mike, listen, time is flying.
Absolutely.
Time is absolutely flying. Now, so let me just ask you a couple of quick questions, because then I want to get your associate in quickly. Sure. Because we are, we're moving ahead. So let me ask you, I was going to go over Brian Higgins' resume, his biography that he's laying here, but already time is flying. So,
yeah, so I'll be real quick on that.
Okay, well, give me something really quick. You got
so really
60
quick,
seconds.
You mentioned that you were really impressed with this resume. I'm a results-based person. I'm a results-based person. Third most impoverished city. 10th within the top 10 most violent city. He's been in office for 20 years. One of the highest minority unemployment rates. One of the biggest loss of population, 34,000 over the last 10 years. 30% of our manufacturing jobs have left the area over the last 10 years. There is nothing, if you go down the list of every possible accomplishment, every possible accomplishment, what's his resume really have on it? He's got the waterfront, but that's really a local issue. It's not a federal issue. It's not a congressional issue. Mm-hmm. His record is one of serious failure. I mean, we are in a dying community. The Canadian consulate's leaving because of lack of commerce in this area, lack of business. One of the lowest minority business ownership. I mean, look at. So
you're going to be able to change that?
We change it by changing the culture. What we're doing is we're not educating our children. If we educate, education leads to freedom, removal of the oppressive government that's currently controlling their lives. If you then have a safer street at Bailey and Kensington, we are 280% above New York City for violent crime. True. This is under his leadership for the last 20 years. His resume, his results, if I were to look at it, I would say, I don't know what you're doing, Mr. Higgins. Please stop. Please stop. Because listen, it's not working.
Look, say you were elected to Congress. Would you be able to work with Democrats?
Absolutely. Yes.
Would you be able to work? Would you be able to work with Obama?
Yes.
If he's still the president.
Absolutely. And I want to emphasize, one of the biggest dysfunctional things that are happening is this breach between the Democrats and Republicans, unable to resolve issues. A lot of on both sides of the aisle, half of the Democrats are promising not to raise taxes on anyone above $250,000. The Republicans signed pledges that say that they will raise no taxes. I believe I'm pretty sure I'm the only Republican candidate that has not signed that pledge. Every other candidate, including incumbents and non-incumbents, have signed a pledge that they will not raise taxes.
So does that mean?
And I believe that when you sit across the table from each other, you're almost at irreconcilable differences. We need to work together and say, how do we fix this problem? Let's get rid of these pledges and fix the problem, which means
so do you believe that the rich could pay a little bit more to help us out of our position?
Some people are going to have to give more. We need a safety net. We need to make sure that we grow small business. We need to figure out how do we get there, working together to fix this problem.
Okay, would you please?
And I would like to emphasize, whether it's Occupy, whether it's Tea Party, whether it's Republican, Democrat, Independent, Conservative, whoever has the best interest in the constituents, not the special interests, which is where my opponent is, not the big business, you name it, unions, you name it, I will work with them to help us return to prosperity.
We've only got a little bit of time left. Would you please introduce your associate?
Hey. Yes, this is Quamina Wallace.
Quamina Wallace.
Yes. And he's a consultant for my campaign.
You're a consultant for his campaign, and you are a black Republican, is that correct?
I am. Yes.
All right, listen, I want you to, as briefly as you can, explain to the public, to America, why you're a black Republican.
Oh, as I told you earlier on, Buffalo made me a Republican.
Buffalo made you a Republican?
Yeah, Buffalo made me a Republican. I'm originally from New York City. I came to Buffalo to go to school, UB. And when I came to Buffalo, if in New York City, you have 5 cities make up one city with one mayor. So I came to Buffalo, I thought, oh, all the cities surrounding Buffalo are all controlled by Mayor Brown. So a friend of mine told me, oh no, all the cities have the chief executive who control the city. So I was like, hold on. So if I drive through Amherst to Walgo, Tonawanda, those cities look beautiful. Those cities are, I think that there's no blight on those cities. But if you drive through Maine and Delavan, if you drive to Jefferson, He said Buffalo is dying. Buffalo looks like Cincinnati or
That's true.
Cincinnati.
That's true.
So I asked myself, what's going on? These cities are all run by Republicans. Buffalo has been run by Democrats as long as we all know. So what's going on? So that's what I sat back and said, if we keep on doing the same to keep on electing Democrats into office in Buffalo, and Buffalo keep on dying, do we have to ask ourselves, can we copy from Amherst or can we copy from Cheektowaga? Because as I tell, retailers do this all the time. If Target is doing something better, it's making money, trust me, Walmart's gonna steal from them. They're gonna, okay, they're doing A, B, C, let's do A, B, C, and so we can also develop. So if, where I live on UB South campus, so I live right on the border between Buffalo and Amherst. So like I see what Amherst is doing right. So I always ask myself, why can't we copy from Amherst? 2 weeks ago, a list came about the best schools, the best school districts in New York State, and Buffalo was 10th from the bottom. Cheektowaga was 4th from the top, and Cheektowaga is right across from Buffalo. So Cheektowaga is 4th from the top.
So point being?
My point being, it gets a certain point in time, we have to ask ourselves, if we have Democrats in power all this time and they're doing what they are doing, can we change them? Let's change them.
If we have Democrats in power all this time and nothing's changed, it's only went down, then can we change them?
Yes, let's change them, because as I told you earlier on.
Were you ever a Democrat?
Yeah, my dad's a Democrat. I was raised in a Democratic household.
You were raised a Democrat?
Yeah, so if you raise a Democratic household, all you see is blue. It's like, I grew up a Democrat.
So you're saying you watched what's going on and you got tired of it and you decided to become a Republican?
Republican, yes.
Because you think the Republicans are going to make a change?
Yes, because if we have two main parties in America. So if the Democrats are doing, have run the city down, they have to try the other party. It's simple. It's like,
But what if the other party is too extreme?
No, listen, when it comes to local governments, right, no party is too extreme.
To local government?
When it comes to local government, no party is too extreme.
You have a point there.
Because you have to, your people, your main goal is to make sure the people you are governing get a better life. You know, so you can't be too extreme in local government. Like, when
are you going to vote for Mitt Romney?
No. I'm going to tell you this, no. I'm going to vote for Mike Madigan, yes.
You're going to vote for Mike Madigan, yes.
I'm voting for Mike Madigan. Why? Because the first time I met Mike Madigan, I asked, what do you believe in? He said education. And nobody's talking about education in Buffalo.
Yes, he did say that.
Right? If you see Buffalo education system, and I've been to all the schools, work for Mike Madigan. I've been to Lafayette, Riverside. If you go to all the schools and talk to teachers, education in Buffalo is it's at a point in time where we have to stand up and say, no, we got to change education in Buffalo. It's a civil rights issue. I always said, it's like if a mother, a single mom who is working like 16 hours a day, has a kid, that mother might not have enough money to send a kid to daycare. And if your kid needs daycare and child education, trust me, it's very difficult for him or her to get ahead in life. So if Buffalo education system have this test school, so but you have to take an exam to go to City Honors or McKinley. And this kid didn't.
Amina, I'm sorry. I hate to cut you off. We got about a minute and a half left. I'm sorry. Good point, Mr. Madigan. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Say what you need to say. 30 seconds.
So I think, you know, when I look at what's happening here in Buffalo, there is a different way. There is a chance for prosperity. I agree with one thing you mentioned was, I think the Republicans have failed to engage, and we need to engage. So go ahead.
Sorry, everybody. It always flies so fast. Time is already up again. Unfortunately, we have Mike Madigan and Mr. Kwamina here. It's been very informative. All I can tell you is, until next time, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Thank you.